Hi guys, Maximilian Gillberg here. I'm here to talk to you about why is it so important with young leaders, and I got my notes to aid me. And I'll start off with what kind of value does a young leader bring to the table in comparison to older ones. Now, for me, the most obvious one is that new perspectives. Old problems require new solutions. What do I mean by that? If you're trying to solve a problem that has been present within your life, your company, your culture, your employees, whatever, or business, if you try to solve that problem by doing the exact same thing, you'll get the same exact results, right? You've heard that before, that when you do the same old thing, you'll get the same old results. That means that when you have an old problem, it's probably something that you haven't done yourself that is innovative in that situation or a new way of thinking. And that perspective a young leader can bring in. It can be as simple as they ask a couple of questions: why do you do this and how does this work? And then you start figuring out like, wait a minute, maybe I should do this instead and this and that. Now, I've thought about this a lot and I've spoken to many people about this. And the biggest reason for people wanting to bring in young people and hear their perspective is because they have completely other ways of looking at the world. Just take, for example, the generational aspect. Now, what am I? What kind of generation am I? 23. So, do I count as a millennial? Maybe I do. What happens with me? Okay, so in comparison to a Gen Z, to a Gen X, and to a baby boomer, well, we have completely different worldviews because probably we've experienced so many different things. The world has changed a lot within just 70 years. It's crazy how much things has changed. Just innovative technologies, revolutionary technologies, and we haven't really accustomed ourselves psychologically or physically to the environment that we're living in right now. But still at the same time, through the span of 5 years, if you look back just at your phone, what kind of phone did you have? What kind of features did it have? Just look at your computer. What kind of processing power did it have? Like, those innovative technologies has led to a revolution of new ways of thinking, to new ways of working. Now, my generation, for example, we're literally brought up with smartphones. Now, not in the age of like 12 years old, but at around 13, smartphones really became the big thing in the world, and everyone had one. Now, the younger generation, those that literally are at 2 years old, get a smartphone in their hand, they're a different story. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about this generation right now that's actually entering the workforce right now, that's entering the markets, that are entering and starting careers in their life. Now, we bring a lot of perspectives that many really don't think about. As in, for example, we're more tech savvy. A lot of people know that already, but really need to think about that. We're more tech savvy. A solution to a problem would take us maybe, I don't know, a couple of seconds or just looking at a screen in order to figure something out when it comes to technical solutions or problems, like in Meet, Google Meet, Zoom, whatever you call it, or your computer is acting up. Like, you know, these tips and tricks, and it just comes automatically. But I know for a fact that when I talk to people that are so much older, they ask me for help, and I was like, bro, you should just look at the screen and just you see literally the solution, you see the problem. No, I really don't see, because they're in their box. That's a great example, actually, to enlighten my point or illustrate my point, that when you have, for example, the older generations, what I've experienced is that when they have a problem with their computer, say they're in a browser and they're trying to find a button, they look within literally the screen, as in where the browser ends at, but then you have taskbar, and then you have task manager and activities field and all that. But they really don't look at that. They look at, like, they have this narrow view and perspective and this lens focused on like, this is the website, this is how it looks like. No, you should look at the browser instead. You should look at the screen itself. You should maybe go into settings, and then I kind of automatically think that because I'm brought up in that way. So with that having said, I bring new perspectives because I'm thinking other ways. And I know a lot of other people do that as well, especially my generation. Now that is an aspect that is incredibly valuable, because we're brought up in different conditions, we're brought up with different values probably. And in another world, like just wind back time 10 years, and I remember that, wind back time 10 years, like the world has changed a lot. It really has. Technologies and industries and whatever. Complete industries have basically been wiped out because of what? Well, revolutionary technologies, innovative ways of thinking and new perspectives. Now, having that said, I would say that the value that a new young leader that brings to the table in comparison to old is the perspective of new perspectives, new ways of thinking. And we ask questions, like we're not afraid to ask questions. And I think that's a great advantage, especially with young leaders. We're great at asking questions because we're brought up with, in order to understand the world, we ask questions. Now, I'm not saying that older generations do not ask questions. What I want to illustrate or highlight is that we ask different kinds of questions. We ask different kinds of questions in different scenarios, in different ways. We really examine the world and we have a critical way of thinking in most any way possible, we young leaders. If you, for example, just look at the social structure of how humans behave, we ask questions like, why are we doing this? Ask a child, like those people that are parents or have worked with children or in some way been in contact with children, and you will probably really know this. Now, I worked with children before. I've been an instructor, karate, skiing, and sailing. So I know what I'm talking about when it comes to this, and that is that these children ask me these questions about why should I do this? How does this look like? And they give new perspectives. I'm like, wow, that's incredible. And you know, that's the child's mind. And everyone has that. Like that's a generational thing that has been going on since the date of time when we started to speak. That children ask the questions and why do this, and how and what. But now we are more encouraged to actually ask these questions, especially in my school. I'll actually bring that up as a note and comment that. In Swedish educational system, I'm born and raised in Sweden, we are valued of the way of how we criticize or think, or critically think, not criticize, critically think. Now, we get assignments that are based off critically analyze these websites, critically analyze these papers, critically analyze these sources. Why are they saying that? What is the perspective of the author? What kind of intentions does that person have? Having that said, we are more prone to ask questions and actually critically analyze the world, analyze situations, analyze people. And I know that because I've had for example, I had a talk with my father, like this Sunday we had a great talk, me and my father and mother, and we talked on the phone and FaceTime, and they said that, oh yeah, you ask so good questions, you have another way of thinking. I'm like, yeah, thank you, I appreciate that. But what do you mean? What? And they're like, well, my generation or our generation really don't ask those questions. So we focus on other things. We're more focused on material things, and you guys are more prone to talk about feelings. You're more prone to talk about values. You're more prone to ask those difficult questions and actually engage in those difficult conversations to get to know other people and actually try to figure out where you're in the world and how you want the world to look like. I'm like, that's extremely interesting. Like, is that something you've noticed with only me? No, your friends as well. And I was like, okay, I'm not saying that that should prove your whole point, or should prove my whole point of that all that young leaders based off my sole experience, but that is my experience, and I've heard multiple people say that as well. So having that said, just think about the perspective of that we're brought up and we're actually molded in this new environment that is completely new and saturated with technical innovation, and we made so much progress that when it comes to technology and all that, that we literally have another way of thinking. We ask other kinds of questions. Just looking at us young leaders now, we're brought up in a world that is literally safe everywhere we go. Like, for me, example, I can go out on the streets and probably won't get robbed if I don't enter the wrong areas, right? There's always exemptions, right? But overall, it's quite safe. It's quite safe. It's quite safe to say that we have high education levels. Like, we have access to education, we have access to food, shelter, and heat. We have access to socialize. We have access to so many things that many older generations didn't have, which means that we have developed other sorts of skills. We have developed highly communicative skills regarding the internet and digitally. Now, there are some research papers and articles suggesting that, well, we're getting more asocial. Well, I think that really depends on how you look at it. Like, we become more asocial in the physical interaction, yes, but we become more social in the digital sphere. And there are a lot of research showing that we tend to focus more on the values, and therefore when we look for people to become friends with or build a relationship with, we tend to look at their values more than what they do. Okay, to sum it all up, what value does a new leader bring in comparison to old leaders? New perspectives, new ways of thinking, new solutions to older problems. Because, why? We've been brought up, born and raised in a new technological age and era. It's completely different. The playground is completely different in comparison to what it was 30, 40 years ago, or 50 years ago, or 60 years ago. So with that having said, I want to challenge you to think how, or ask yourself these questions. How do I make sure that I bring in new perspectives that challenges me and ask questions that I don't? Okay, I'll repeat that challenge to you. Ask yourself this question: how do you make sure that you get new perspectives and new questions asked so that you get challenged in the way of your thinking, in the way of your doing things? Now, having that said, I would love you guys to like, comment, subscribe, and I would love to hear if you agree with me, if you don't, and if you don't, please explain why. And I would also like to hear what kind of videos do you want to see more of. So basically, thank you, bye bye.